more pertinent over yoga, but I do know yoga is also helpful as well. So I'm in general support of this, and I think it's a vital part of making sure that police are able to do their job well. And I don't also would add on to that, as far as the implicit bias piece, that doesn't lead to that. And also, being stressed on your job is not also an excuse to, do violent things in the community as well.
I would like to state that the yoga program came out of the Bend, Oregon program, which showed a lot of success, mainly as a way to get officers to do various exercises they might not otherwise do. As well, it was shown that one of the comments I heard from an officer who never had tried yoga before that was, it was the first time I've slept all night in 5 years. And that was kind of the benefit of that. If you think about any job where you're not sleeping, you're going to make more mistakes and you're going to do more things that you probably wish you hadn't in your job. The difference is when I do those things in my job, it doesn't really affect anyone but my coworkers. When police do those kind of things in their jobs, it affects a lot of people in the community in a very negative way.
I think as it relates to implementing a wellness program, one of the questions I ask myself is who benefits in law enforcement, and thinking about communities of color and specifically law enforcement officers of color, either Black or Hispanic, Latino, and how mental health is stigmatized in communities of color, and who would actually access that programming. So I want to be mindful of people who may not be captured in that. And on the broader scale, what I didn't hear is how law enforcement's trained to build relationships, and we know relationships build trust in communities, and how we're going to build transparency for accountability, which is what I think people are asking for.
I think again, this is kind of a separate issue. We are basically taking these issues as separate pieces with our recommendations. If you look at our website, you can get our full list of recommendations and the various things that we have handled over the past couple of years. I guess one of the big reasons that the TAC supported this in such a strong fashion was the idea that one of the few things that seems to hit so many, at least takes a bite out of so many of these different things and has a portion in so many of these different things that we see as important to the Bureau going forward. Obviously, the interactions with communities of color, as well as the transient community, are two very big things. We believe that an officer wellness program would improve these situations because we do not believe that the majority of officers are purposely going to go out and do bad things. We think of them as human beings who are put under stress and put under situations which I think, if anybody's put under, will eventually crack and show in some way a negative reaction. And so we want to try to solve that because we believe it will help the community overall. On top of that, we believe it will help the officers, and we believe it will help things in the Bureau that they're facing, such as the problem of hiring enough officers or filling vacancies that they currently have.
I just had a question. Was there a budget attached to that?
No, there was not. From the programs we've seen in Indianapolis and San Diego and Bend, the costs have been quite minimal over the long term, mostly because you cut off things like overtime as you get a full officer complement. You don't have to train as many people because officers tend to stay in the community longer or part of the Bureau longer, as well as you get more lateral applications from other bureaus of people wanting to move to Portland to become officers.
Yeah, and I was just wondering, is it not part of their medical benefit?
Yes, it also has shown in the communities where it's been implemented fewer sick days, fewer injuries.
Wellness and their medical benefit. Or would they have to access that through mental health services and then there's a stigma attached to it?
There is currently the employee assistance program, which most city employees have access to, where they can go to mental health providers. Part of this would be hopefully expanding that to better meet the officers' needs. We've heard reports of officers going to mental health providers provided through the employee assistance program, and basically the mental health providers not being capable of handling the situations police find themselves in, and halfway through the treatments dropping out, saying we can't keep you as basically a patient. Which, as you can imagine, if you're trying to access mental health, to have your mental health provider say, I can't handle what you're going through, is not something that helps at all. One of the big things we're hoping is because one of the things we specifically said was we want this to be something where if you're going to be a leader in the bureau in the future, you have to have been supportive of this and even shown that you're willing to be a part of it. Same thing with people who are going to be in charge of training, because we want to change the culture away from the stigma of mental health to this is a necessary part of the job.
Sean, excuse me, thank you very much for your presentation. I fully believe that as you presented, this is a benefit to police officers as well as to the budgetary needs of the police department. Is there any data out there about the effects, beneficial or otherwise, to the community, anecdotal or anything else? I'm thinking if officers are more mindful, perhaps they'd be more likely to use de-escalation techniques in the moment, perhaps less lethal use of force, those sort of things. Is anybody keeping track of that, or have you seen any of that in your research?
Many of these programs are quite new, so it's been difficult to collect data. But for instance, BEND, which program was put in place in 2012, they've reported a 20% reduction in the use of force that they are applying because of these programs.
Thank you.
And when you keep referring to Ben, did they look at the population difference? And then
Yes, that would be based upon the ratio of use of force to population.
I'm talking about the demographics of race and ethnicity out there to here.
Not that I'm aware of. I do know they did look at it some in Indianapolis and San Diego, both cities with a much more diverse population, which are also two of the cities that we suggested modeling a wellness program off of.
Okay, let's open it up to,
Excuse me.
go ahead.
Not meaning to sound mean, but this is a benefit, and I'm wondering exactly what percentage the Portland Police Association will be paying for this.
As far as paid for the health benefits or?
Paying for the, I mean, this is gonna cost money, I would imagine, some, and, this isn't just a problem for the Portland Police or the city of Portland, who is, the city says, and the police say, we don't have enough funding in our budget for the police. Recognizing that,
In the long term, it's widely believed that these programs will be fairly cost neutral. In the short term, there is an investment that has to be made, but in the long term, just the savings and things like overtime, officer injuries, that kind of stuff. For instance, currently overtime, the Portland Police Bureau spends about $11 million a year, and that has been rising steadily over the last decade
yes,
due to not being able to get enough officers to fill positions.
yes. But short term then, for instance, would the Portland Police Association be paying any of the build-up costs for this?
As far as like the individual members themselves paying towards, I guess I'm a little confused about the question.
For instance, my dad was a Teamster for 30 years.
Yeah.
And the Teamsters would have this kind of program. I had mental health benefits for my entire childhood. And so I'm wondering why the Portland Police Association doesn't feel this is important enough to pay for their employees to have.
As far as,
Or if they do, why are they going to be paying part of that, I guess is.
I don't think those discussions have happened yet.
Okay.
At this point, the idea of a wellness program is in its infancy.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Great. We're going to open it up to public comment. I do want to be mindful that we're significantly behind on the agenda. We do have a DOJ presentation, so just to keep that in mind. Yeah. Go ahead. We only have one microphone, so if you just want to...
share.
Sure.
Thank you, Sean. I'm Philip Wolf, and I wanted to let you know I was formerly involved with a 6-month contract with the state working with the Department of Public Safety Standards Training. And I was in Salem for 6 months, and through that experience, there were there's a few things I want you to keep in mind when thinking about a wellness program. I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm all for it, but there are a few things to remember. PSEP members, I just wanted to give you a heads up. If there's only 10 million invested for the gang task force, that some of that money might have to be allocated for this. And the concept of this program will be moot if we don't do three things. First, when I was there at DPST for 6 months, you know, every morning, noon, and night, there would be officers that would, you know, they would have the sergeant, you know, up, and they would be doing this military style marching, and that needs to be done away with. If they're continue with, you know, if they're doing that, but adding in this meditation and yoga is completely worthless. And in the dorms where officers sleep officers sleep in the dorms and convene for 3 weeks, and they're focusing on public safety, but they sleep there, they work together there, they eat together there, they build a community there, they kind of develop this frat mentality, and that's where police culture is developed, and we need to dismantle that and work against that. And that is causing a problem. We need to dismantle police culture. And the third thing, implicit bias. All of the trainers at DPST are white males. And that's where police are learning that implicit bias. They're being taught by that. Implicit bias doesn't mean, you know, you can take it off. It's inside. You know, even when you're at home, wherever, whatever space you're in, you still have that, whether you're on the job or not. So I just wanted to, you know, really bring home that